A players hire A plus players, B players hire C players. And I believe that. I've seen that play out 1,000 times over because B players are too afraid that if they hire A players, they're going to be superseded by that. I think that's actually the best way to build a great team, because if you can do those two things, we're going to do great things together.
Today, we're excited to have Sam Allen from Salesforce join us to talk about his leadership style and what makes companies like Salesforce endure for the long run. Sam's a brilliant leader, entrepreneur, and this is going to be a lot of fun. For those of us meeting Sam for the first time, he's currently EVP and Global CEO for Tableau at Salesforce. He's in his 8th year at Salesforce and previous roles as EVP and CEO for Salesforce.org, SVP and CEO of Global Marketing, and VP of Corporate Development and Head of M&A Integration.
What we're going to learn from Sam today is a lot of his experiences, both coming from the military, time at Wharton Business School, going from a large software organization to starting his own company, and then going back to a large organization and the complexities that go with building a team, not only here in the US, but from a global perspective, and really understanding the leadership challenges, the product challenges, and just general learnings that he has. We're super excited to have Sam. Hope you enjoy listening. We've noticed over the years that a lot of successful leaders have come from backgrounds that have challenged them to overcome obstacles that most people never overcome. But somehow these folks went a different path and were able to break through. For me, growing up, came from complex family environment, went through 6 divorces, came from rural Kentucky, being medically discharged from the Army. All of those things could have given me an excuse to maybe go down a different path. And Esther, I'll just speak for you. You were born in a communist country, moved here in elementary school, not knowing the language or the culture. And of course, a lot of adapting while trying to succeed growing up. And for both of us, where we came from, rural Kentucky again, hungry in the 80s for Esther, really colored who we are and our drive to succeed. So we've heard you talk about this in some of your other podcasts, but can you tell us a little bit about your origin story and, for lack of a better term, how you went down a different path than maybe folks that you grew up with?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is great. Appreciate the time. So it's an interesting bridge. And I think I'll talk a lot about values and adherence to values as kind of the steadfast way to navigate your way through. But, my own origin story, I'm from a very blue collar background. My father was a Teamster truck driver. I grew up in, lower middle class, Kansas City, Missouri in the 70s. Great, very undervalued decade, by the way.
Agreed.
And, kind of started working when I was started working when I was 15. I mean, I was technically working when I was a kid. I was mowing lawns and shoveling driveways, and my father had me and my 2 brothers out cutting lumber, every fall. It was a great childhood, but it had its rough patches. My father unfortunately was consumed by alcoholism. So I spent my teens dealing with that. I think when you're faced with challenges, you kind of have to go back to the foundation of who you are and what you believe in. And unfortunately, too many people take these challenges in the wrong direction, as you kind of alluded to. Yeah. And you've got to kind of look inside yourself at some point and say, okay, what path do I want to follow? And that's kind of been a central decision-making criteria for me my entire life now. Is I try and look as far down a path as I can and say, is that the direction I want to go or not? And each path has its own set of challenges and rewards, and you've got to kind of pick those. But I think what these tough times do, this doesn't even bring into the fact, I was in the Marine Corps and all that they provide you with perspective. And it's interesting, Esther. I talk about. I come from this kind of hard scrabble background, but I did grow up in the United States. It's not like I grew up in a third world country or in a communist run country. It can be a lot worse. And I think that sense of perspective is so key in dealing with challenges and driving personal growth, and to kind of anchor yourself to that there's always a better world out there if you're willing to go pursue it. And my own personal mantra, and not everyone thinks this way, is you got to kind of go earn. And central to all my development and my backstory is work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm just willing to work for what I want and what I want to get. I think that's critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of double click on that concept of earning it. I think that's sort of what this type of background sets you up for, right? Is that you don't have anything to start, so you don't expect anything. And so you start thinking about how to, how to get to the next level. And so you're not thinking, I'm sure when you're growing up, hey, I'm going to be an executive at one of the largest software companies in the world. You're thinking, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So you just maybe talk us through a little bit, sort of this step-by-step evolution that got you, where you are, and how far ahead in the future are you looking?
Yeah.
Did you see this maybe? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you did see this for yourself.
But also on the work ethic piece, Sam, when did you realize that you had that? Because I think even as a 16-year-old, realizing that your words are kind of on your own, was that like a conscious decision? Or was that something that over time you realized, oh, I have a different speed than maybe others? Or even as you've excelled across your career, it sounds like that chip has never gone away. And maybe when did you realize that was like a force multiplier for you, where others maybe didn't have that experience and didn't have that drive?
Yeah, no problem. It's an interesting question though, and like self-realization. Like I don't think I realized that I had a advantage, I guess, in work ethic until well into my late 20s, early 30s. It probably tied to my transition out of the Marine Corps and into the civilian world, where I would look around and be like, this is what you're complaining about? There's not enough milk in the kitchen. Like, give me a break, and just really focusing on my job and delivery. And, I think part of it too was because I started my civilian career so late, my peers, by the time I joined the workforce, had 8-10 years under their belt, and I was brand new. I had to play catch up, so I had to work harder. And I often I just said this last week, I often say that I'm never the smartest or hardest working person in the room. That's not an indictment of either my intelligence or my work ethic, because I think both are formidable. But what I try to do is surround myself with people who have that same attitude of just steadfastness around work. But going back to your question, Esther, I'd love to sit here and tell you I've got this grand vision and plan, and that it was all mapped out. It wasn't. I was going to join the Army and not go to college because my father said, I'm not going to pay for you to go to school. I didn't go to college. I don't think you need it. And he came home one day, and the Army recruiter was in me. He's like, what the hell is he doing here? And I said, well, I'm going to join the Army. I'm 18, and that's what I'm going to do. And the recruiter left, and my dad wasn't exactly nice to him. My dad had been in the Navy too, so it's not like he and all his brothers were in the military. And my older brother at that time was in the Air Force Academy, so it's not like there was any anti-military. In fact, it was the other way around. But he just didn't want me joining the Army, and I said, "Well, you're not giving me any choice. I'm not going to go work in the Ford factory." And so when I went down to the recruiter, and I'm sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but I had scored very high on my ASVAB, the vocational battery test you take to join the military. It used to be compulsory. I guess they're not anymore. I don't know. But he said, hey, we have this new program. If you stay in college, you spend your entire summer in the Marine Corps plus 1 weekend a month. So it's kind of like an active reserve plus program, at the end of which, if you graduate, you get a commission. You can go spend, a career as a commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. So I thought, well, that's a cool option. I'll take that, and a kind of core component of who I am is I make decisions really, really fast. And sometimes, I pay for that. But generally it's worked out for me well. And so, I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend my life in the Marine Corps. And so I did my 4 years in college, did my, summers in the Marines plus my 1 weekend a month. I graduated and took a commission, and off I went. and thought I would spend 20, 30 years in the Marines. That was who I was, and it was very core to my identity, and I loved it, every second of it, and I loved being a leader. And then 6 years later, decided to get out. So we can dig into that later. But, again, it was just kind of a doors open, and you kind of stick your head through, and does it look interesting on the other side? Sure, off I go. And so right now, my oldest son is 18. We're in the middle of looking at colleges, and he's stressed out. He's like, I don't know what I want to major in. I said, you're probably going to change your major 3 times. And what you do in college does not dictate what you're going to do in your life. It sometimes does, of course, but just chill out a little bit, and take advantage of everything that offers from an opportunity perspective, and just see what doors it opens, because you're going to be surprised at what you're going to find out as you go through that process. So to me, I don't have a grand plan. I don't know where I'm going to be 5 years from now. I literally don't, either work-wise or, even where I'm going to be living. But I just kind of keep my head up for any opportunity that will pull up. And if it matches kind of how I'm feeling at that moment, then I'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean, that tracks with my experience as well. I thought I was going to be in the military for a very long time. My father was 30 years Air Force. I thought I was going to go down that route. But a couple things that I did take from the military outside of the soft skills component is being able to deal with ambiguity, and something that we're taught in the military that I know you mentioned on a previous podcast, that no mission survives first contact. And so the ability or finding opportunity in some of those situations. So I think you couple the drive that you had, the ability to process information quickly, maybe faster than others, or kind of see all of the angles quicker than most. How has that helped you throughout your career, especially on that opportunity piece?
Well, we mentioned perspective earlier. I think that's important. I think the other thing is the ability to process information very quickly and not get bogged down in the details. One of my favorite, mantras is directionally accurate, and it's was kind of honed in you in the military. Like, if you're under fire, you either need to attack through it or get the hell out of it.
The wrong decision.
You can't just sit there and go through analysis paralysis. Yeah, and you just got to move, shoot, move, and communicate. Shoot, move, and communicate. Move, and that's kind of been what's in the back of my head. And as you do that, somebody has to keep their head about them, and that's just been a key component of my success. And what I often talk about in my career is, the concept of triage, and, what is important, and, focusing on those priorities and getting those done first. And if you're trying to fix a twisted ankle while you're bleeding out, that's the wrong thing. So if you apply that in the corporate world, if I have a very dire customer situation and this customer is about to leave my business and cost us millions of dollars, and I got someone chirping in my ear about some administrative thing that can wait, I don't pay attention to it. Now, the communicate part is very important. What I don't do also is just ignore folks, because A, that's bad leadership, and B, you got to bring people with you on the journey. And part of my responsibility as a leader is to help mold future leaders. And so I want them to understand what's going on in my head so that they can help them develop. And so what I'll do in a situation like that is I'll say, look, I'm not going to respond to this right now. Yep. Here's why. And please understand there's higher priorities right now. And that's actually a hard message. A lot of, folks, there's a, just to be honest, there's a lack of intestinal fortitude, I think, in a lot of leaders to not deliver an unpopular message. And there's a fantastic, I don't know what her title is. Her name's Brene Brown. She's written some books. We've had her speak at Salesforce, and one of her sayings that I just love is being clear is being kind. And that doesn't mean the message is kind. And so I've never had a problem with delivering, unpopular, news, but that's just how you move forward, right? Every decision you make, there's someone on the upside of that decision and someone on the downside of that decision. The important thing isn't to worry about the downside. The important thing is to explain to the people on the downside why you made the decision the way you did, so they can buy in, right? And so when I think about that concept of triage, it's what's the number one priority, and then what's 2 through N priority, and how are we going to address those things? And that then leads to, if you do that in a very smart way and you stick to that, then it also leads to things like investment decisions. So how am I going to invest my resources, whether it's capital or people or technologies or whatever, that's where the bulk of your investment should go. I think underpinning that, you do need to keep your eye and your head up a little bit on the long-term vision. So, there are times where in this triage environment, something will in fact be a really high priority, but if it doesn't tie to something you're doing from a long-term strategic perspective, your job as a leader is to point that out also. And so there are some times where things look like an emergency, but they really aren't, because it's not a direction we need to go in the long term anyway.
That resonates, I think, a lot with Taylor and I. I think priority setting at any business is one of the key things that you have to do as a leader, that if you're not doing, nobody else is doing. And so I've heard you on prior podcasts talk about sort of 3 values that are important to you. And they were, I think, and correct me if this is, but like integrity, dependability, and courage. And I think integrity and dependability are sort of, okay, like, yes, I'm running a business, I'm a leader. Those are words that we're maybe used to hearing in that context pretty frequently, and they're very, very important. That's why. But I don't, hear courage a lot. And so, and I thought that was, super interesting when I heard you say it. So can you talk to us a little bit about it? You started down that road a little bit. It's just delivering bad news is, of course, that takes some amount of courage, even if you're a leader, even if you're used to it, because you know that there is going to be a reaction. What other things? How do you think about courage, and how do you think about that contributing as a leader to an enduring business model and pushing those boundaries, perhaps?
Courage to me, when you're young, especially in the military, it starts off as the physical form, right? Can you stand up in the face of adversity? And adversity means bullets coming at you, right? And, lead your way through that. I'm here to tell you that moral courage is a lot harder to pursue than physical courage. And moral courage is only so when I talk about that as a value, it's really on the moral side. I sell software. There's no physical danger in my life anymore. Sometimes you kind of miss that juice. But anyway, topic for another time. But the moral courage is the drive, the underpinning drive to stand up, make decisions. And, many times the decisions are popular, right? It's like someone just wants someone to make a decision. And, it's also about feedback, and it's about speaking truth to power. And too many companies, and I've been in several, talk about values, but don't stick to them. And this is one of the things that has endeared me to Salesforce and kept me here for so long, is we believe in our value system. And we talk about our value system, and our leaders go through leadership development where you spend time on value, what values are most important to you, because you've got to kind of anchor on something. And the important thing too is that my values don't necessarily mean they're your values, right? And so that's fine. But what are the most important things that help drive and guide your decision making? So, the moral courage is also about, defending your people. And you making sure your people have the resources to do their job, because we ask a lot of our employees, especially through COVID, right? When everyone's dealing with a lot of personal issues and what's going on in the world around us right now, it's not fun. And then they come to work all day and there's a lot of demands from them. And so, if people feel like they don't have the tools to do their job, you as a leader, it's your responsibility to get them those tools. And that means you have to go fight for them. And any Salesforce looking at their company, there's a limited number of resources, and they're going to put their resources they think they're best utilized. And it's your job to explain to them why you should be one of those, centers of investment. I see a lot of leaders and throughout my career who don't stand up at that point and make an impassioned but reasoned plea based in sound business judgment. They'll make an impassioned plea, but it's not based in sound business judgment, or they'll make a sound business judgment plea that doesn't have kind of the softer component to it. So that's where the moral courage really comes in, and I think a lot of it too is around feedback. There's just this. I don't know if I think it's mostly in the U.S., but I've seen it in other parts of the world. The lack of ability to give people feedback is kind of mind blowing to me, because I want every employee to have a great career, and have success, but we all have challenges. I have challenges. I'm not perfect. I have gaps, but you're often blind to them. And if people aren't pointing those out to you, then you can't grow as a human being. You can't grow as a person. And that applies in personal lives as well. But too many leaders just don't want to take on that mantle and leave it to some process or some other mechanism to deliver that tough message. I am content. I don't like doing it. No one likes to deliver that, but I am content telling someone, hey, here's where your gaps are. Here's where your strengths are. When my kids were little, I used to, like a lot of dads, coach baseball and all that, and soccer. And I remember going to a clinic, and they said, you need to give a feedback in a feedback sandwich. You tell them something good, and then you give them the feedback, and you tell them something good again. So you start on a high note and end on a high note. And I thought that was pretty good, because in the Marine Corps, it's just basically the meat part of the sandwich.
Right.
You're fucking up anyway. But that was a how to teach kids t-ball or coach kids t-ball, and I use that now. And so it used to be, one of my learning thing was I was less empathetic. And I would give people feedback, but I'd kind of give them just the feedback part. And that doesn't land as well. And I started doing this kind of feedback sandwich. I'm like, wow, this works a lot better, because people are, they're not just taking it like, oh my God, this guy's got a problem with me. It's, hey, here's what you're doing really well. Here's where you need work. And here's what you're doing well. And let's talk about next steps. And so it goes back to that communication thing I mentioned earlier. But again, that all takes moral courage. Like, you've got to find that within yourself to do that, and recognize that it can be self-serving, because if you make the people around you better, they're going to make you better. And so that, if you keep that in the back of your head,
that's really good advice too, because when you have someone that is a top performer, and especially with an organization that is trying to grow, I mean, we see it with our organization, around 1,000 people. I can only imagine an organization like yours that's 70,000 plus across all your different business lines, the ability to level up and bring those leaders or those maybe junior leaders or folks on your team to a level where they can kind of backfill your role, so that you can have that view of where we're going strategically. If you're an individual performer and you're not doing that, then the buck stops with you, and you're then going to become the bottleneck. So I think if you're going to build high-performing teams, usually those high performers also want that feedback of how can they get better, and how can they continue to advance and perform. Can you talk a little bit more about how specifically with your team, you talked about context is very important of how you make decisions, because maybe they don't have all the information and they only have a sliver of it, and it's just not making sense to them, but you give them the context of why you made that decision, and this is the route that we're going to go. Can you talk a little bit more about those team members, especially around scaling? Because if you're going to build an enduring business or the largest software company in the world, you have to make sure that you're promoting, but also advancing those individuals so that they have those skill sets, again, so you can get to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about maybe that growth process through your career of how you've had to help those team members and provide that feedback in a constructive way, outside of a kind of like the sandwich that you mentioned, but how are you always continuing to progress so that you can get to that next level, both for your own organization, but for those leaders as well to go take on other roles within the company? Well,
everything always starts and ends with people. And so if you're not investing a material amount of your time there, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, if you're an individual contributor, you got to invest in your peers. And I, as a leader, invest in my peers. Like, I spend time every day of every week reaching out to my peer group, right? Because that's how, even in a company of our size, that's how things eventually get done, is based on the people part. And those relationships that you create and the network that you build. So you have to invest in the people piece. For me, I've got to, don't sound like I'm bragging, but I've built a lot of high performing teams. And if someone told me once that, you have to always be looking out. There's a saying in sales, ABC, always be closing, which I believe in. But the other thing, I'm always looking for great people, and I'm always recruiting. So when I have someone, and I've built teams and I've adopted teams, right? So sometimes you move into a role, especially at my level, you move into a role, you've already got hundreds of people working for you, right? And so finding those diamonds in the rough is really important. And then when you find them, invest in them. A players hire A plus players, B players hire C players. And I believe that. I've seen that play out 1,000 times over, because B players are too afraid that if they hire A players, they're going to be superseded by that. I think that's actually the best way to build great teams. And that's what I mentioned earlier when I said, I'm never the smartest or hardest working person in the room, because I want to hire people that are smarter than I am and work harder than I do. Because if you can do those two things, we're gonna do great things together.
I think that's really important,
Yeah.
especially with maybe folks that are listening that are starting their own businesses and growing, or they're already part of a big organization, or they took over an organization. When you have that B player and you identify it, kind of walk me through how you've dealt with that over your career. You hear a lot of hire slow, fire fast, or when you find somebody that isn't, maybe the right fit, when you know, and most people sit on that for quite some time, maybe longer than they need to. Can you kind of just walk through if you have your own process, or when you identify that, okay, maybe this is a B player, are you trying to coach them up, or are you trying to move them to a different part of the organization?
How I have evolved my thinking is, and this has just been recently in the last 7 or 8 years, is that if someone isn't performing well, you really need to dig in and understand why. There's usually a root cause. I mean, the person got through an interview process and was part of a team, right? And generally what you find is this person was performing and then it degraded over time. So why? And it's either an incentive, it's a personal situation, they're not learning, they're not growing, they're bored, whatever the case may be. These people have intrinsic value. And when you're lucky enough to be in a company like Salesforce where we're growing, my mantra now is, let's understand why this person might not be performing. And then once we understand that, come up with solutions to help solve for that. Because there's a billion studies out there about how expensive it is to terminate somebody and have to rehire the replacement and retrain and onboard and enable and all that. If you can spend 10% of that energy and time and maybe get that person back where you need them to be. But through that conversation, what I have found generally is that folks are like, I don't like doing this anymore. I'm bored, whatever. I need a different role because I'm trying to take care of my mom, And so my approach now is there another opportunity? And sometimes the job just isn't a fit, right? It's just not a fit. And so is there an opportunity for us to put that person in a different role, give them a different set of responsibilities? And sometimes it's the reverse of it, where they're like, this isn't challenging enough for me, right? It's like the classic student in school that's really smart but gets bad grades. And so, okay, what other projects can we give you? That's the bulk of it. There are absolutely cases where someone just isn't performing. And you've got you've a set of tactics you can follow to help correct that. But generally, my approach in almost every case is trying to investigate a little bit about why we're in the situation we're in. I will go back to that comment about A, B, C as a simple kind of map for employee performance. I think if someone's a B, you need a lot of B players. You need folks who actually, not everybody, you don't want every single person to come in thinking, I'm going to be the president of the company someday. And that sounds a little odd.
Right.
But if it is, and you have everybody trying to figure out how they're going to get there and not doing their job. And so you need a lot of people who are just coming in, doing solid work. They're happy to do that. They deliver, they perform. They're not the people at the high end of the right that you want to maybe promote someday and continue to invest in from a career perspective. But, these are people that are really important. And I deeply, deeply believe in diverse teams give you more value. And I mean that diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of opinion. There's the obvious things around ethnicity and background and all that, and those are important too. But you also want people to just think differently than you do. They may look the same, but how do they think and how do they solve problems? And so when I focus on teams, I try and keep that lens in the back of my head too. And the last few roles I've had are all global. I live and work in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I have a global organization. And if I have an American mindset, that's a mistake. And so I've built teams in Europe, I've built teams in Asia Pacific that support the global, because there's great, sharp, amazing people in those regions that we should invest in. And so constantly keeping that in the back of your head that, do we have the right mix of people? Do we have enough underrepresented minorities? Do we have enough females? Do we have enough young people? Do we have older people, right? We need that full kind of Benetton ad, for those of you who understand what that means, of mix of people to really solve problems well. And so that's an important thing also. And that goes again back to the moral courage thing is, I may have a great candidate for a role or a great candidate to invest in a new set of responsibilities, but does he or she or they look exactly like everybody else? And are we doing the right thing there? And so that is another kind of moral courage statement that you got to adhere to those values. I think that's a really important part of building excellent teams. Got to keep that front of mind and coach people through that process. And I mean, we all have unconscious bias. We just have to deal with it. And it's not, the word bias has taken on an incredibly negative connotation with what's going on in the world today. And I think that's unfortunate, because if you tell someone they have bias, they're like, oh, I'm not biased, and I'm like, I'm not saying you're bigoted. What I'm saying is you're making decisions based on your context. And so we've weaponized all these words, which is really unfortunate, because again, you can't grow. You just can't grow as a person. And so it's really, really, really important to recognize those things and work on them, together as a community. And we try to do that as best we can at Salesforce, certainly.
Sam, I really appreciate the dialogue here, and we have just a couple more questions for you. Would love to learn a little bit about the differences between being in a very large organization that has been established but always growing, to starting something from scratch, and kind of the differences there, or the similarities of what you've seen of building a business that can grow and be around for a very long time, executing on their mission.
I started my own business. I actually co-founded it with two of my business school buddies. It wasn't even my idea. Like, I'm not going to sit here and take credit for it. It was one of my idea from a friend of mine. But we all worked very well together in business. Business school is very intense, and it's a lot of project based. And we realized that among the three of us, we all had surfaces covering each other's gaps. And so together we were a really strong, unit, and always talked about starting a business together. And we just, okay, let's come up with the idea, which isn't easy. And so we started our own company, and, went through over a couple of years, went through several rounds of venture financing. And, the similarities to, now we have 2,500 people in my division. It's an 80,000 person company. It's global in scale, billions of dollars of revenue annualized and all that. But the core, we've been talking about leadership tenets. Those are the same. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I found, I tell this to people, when I in my past, I've done a lot of startup advisory. I don't do it anymore. I'm just way too busy with my day job. But when you work at Cisco or Salesforce or Apple or Google, you can get any meeting you want. And when you walk into the meeting, you walk in with that brand behind you, and you throw your business card on the table, and people are reacting. What I often tell folks to bring them down a notch is they're reacting to the business card. The name on there is irrelevant, right? And when you start your own company, your name is what you have to go create the brand around. It makes it much, much more challenging. Like, it's hard to get meetings. It's hard to get people to listen to you. You're a small company, and you're fighting usually much, much bigger entrenched people with a shitload of resources. And you've got to find that definitive competitive advantage that you have. And it might be speed, it might be better technology, it might be better customer service, whatever it is, and really drive that and put a lot of your effort behind that competitive advantage, because you just don't have all the resources of a large company. Even recruiting, like I mentioned earlier, we get 1.5 million resumes a year at Salesforce. Like, we have our pick of the litter across any type of role we want. When you're starting your own company, it's like, why would anybody want to come work for you? Right. And so, right. You've got to, especially in the early stage, like we started in a garage. It was in my garage here in San Carlos, and it was three of us working on a picnic table. And when you try to recruit somebody, they're like, you want me to go where? I'm going to meet you in your garage, or meet you at a coffee shop. Or
That's right.
That early lift is really, really hard. Over my last 10 years or so, I've been presented with several opportunities to go be the CEO of an early stage startup. I'm like, I'm just not going to do that again. I've done it. I feel like I've, kind of checked that box. But I don't want to go expend the energy that it takes to get from that 3, 5, 10 people to 100 people. That is a completely different kind of muscle than managing at a much higher level.
Well, I feel like we could dig into that, and it'd be a completely different podcast.
That's the whole show.
That's like very good information there.
Yeah.
I lied. I'm actually going to ask another question before our last question, because you said something in the very beginning that triggered a thought for me, which was around which kind of goes to the concept of it's hard to be a really good leader if you're not a really good follower. But for those that are listening that maybe haven't started their own business and haven't understood how some of those decisions are made, going into Salesforce, of what did you learn from that experience? Just when you had to make all of the decisions and everybody's looking at you, compared to where someone else was making decisions and you were part of like a bigger org.
Well, the first thing I learned was, once you get two people in a room, there's no buck stops, right? It's like, it's easy to say that, and I just said it a couple of minutes ago, but you have to collaborate. And so, even as I talked about how the three of us who started this company were all very, very, interlocked. But when you get into it and you're faced with a really tough decision, you have differences of opinion. And I would often style myself as a managing director, not a CEO, because the three of us really had kind of equal vote in what we were doing. And I think, especially in the technology space, it's a different world than a lot of other technology, than a lot of other industries. It is a very collaborative environment, and it does not loan itself well to people managing by diktat, right? Like you really want people engaged and invested in what you're doing. Even though it was our own company, and even when it was just the three of us and we're just starting, it was still not, hey, we're going to go do this. It was, here's what I think. Well, I don't agree with you, and here's why. And we would spend hours arguing sometimes over something probably could have made a more efficient decision around. And so, some folks think they're going to go to this small company and it's going to be super easy and fast, and it's just not that way. Now, there are certainly companies where it is purely one person founds the company and they're like, this is what I'm going to go do. I mean, Elon Musk is a great example of that, right? Our founder and CEO is brilliant, Mark Benioff. He has a vision for where he wants to go, and that's where we go, right? And now even at 80,000 people, I've been around him in many, many meetings, and he's almost never wrong, even when you think, oh my God, I don't think that's the right thing to do. So there are examples, but for the most part, you've got to lead more through collaboration. And going back to what I mentioned earlier around communication, getting people on the journey with you is really important, even in a really small company. And sometimes I hear folks say, oh, I'm going to go to the startups. I don't like politics. I'm like, you don't think there's politics with 5 people? There's politics right. No matter where you go, right? So it may be less intense. You're not going to be free of that unless you literally go be a writer, and self-publish, and then maybe you can be free of that in your world. But it's really it's almost an impossible task to find an environment that's completely free of politics, and you have 100% unfettered opportunity to dictate whatever you want.
We started this podcast to try and understand what makes companies endure, and what are the things that really make a Salesforce. And so we like to ask, to wrap up, what is it, do you think? Is it the product or is it the people?
I think it's a combination of things, to be trite about it. First and foremost, especially in the technology space, you got to have a great product. You've got to be an innovator. You've got to constantly change. Salesforce started as a Salesforce automation engine and was excellent at it. And if we had just done that, we'd probably still be a successful company, but 1/100th the size we are today. So you have to constantly innovate, and you have an innovation curve that's very steep in the beginning, and as you grow and get bigger, it starts to naturally lose its slope. And so, what's that next horizon, right? There's books written about this and everything, and a lot of times it's acquisition, right? And so you innovate, you acquire, you're just continually on the assault in building your product and adhering to product excellence, which leads to the next thing, which is customer success. And you've got to make your customers successful. That's how you make your product sticky, is they got to love it, they got to need it, and want you to invest more. Like, I go into customer meetings and they're like, what are you investing in next? And that's the conversation we have, which means the product is very sticky. And so investing in customer success and having them I talked about collaboration. Like, we have advisory boards where customers come in and tell us what they think about what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And we listen to that. Because if you don't, then you're kind of blind to what's going on in the market. So that adherence to customer success is super key. We talk a lot at Salesforce about trust in all its different forms. As the original cloud company, people have to trust that their data is protected. And so that's an important value that we keep, number one. But it's also, and then you get to the people part, and you've got to hire and retain great people. and we had General Colin Powell on our board, rest in peace. And one thing I love about Mark Benioff is he even recognizes that he doesn't have every answer. So he's built this amazing board. And General Powell told him something one time that said, you recruit the soldier, but you retain the family. That's an interesting mantra that we have at Salesforce is, you recruit the employee, but you don't necessarily retain the family, but you create a system in a infrastructure or a construct into which the employee sits that makes that employee very happy. And therefore makes the family happy. And, my wife has often told me, you just can't leave that company. It's just, it's too good to you, right? It's interesting that we've created this environment where it's holistic. It's more than just about your job. It's about, the value system we create as an employer and what we do to support our employees. And we've got a lot of famous stories about how we pull people out of weird situations. We had an employee who had a heart attack while climbing, Mount Everest, and within half a day, we had a helicopter in there and pulled out. I don't know how many companies would do that for their employees, right? Because we just believe in it. Because you're part of we use the word ohana, we're part of our family, and we extend that sense to our customers and everything else. So building that really strong sense of community. We're our company. People leave, they get, they have other opportunities and all that. It's not like we retain everybody, but we do a much better job of it. And our boomerang rate is incredibly high.
Thank you for your time. It's no wonder why Salesforce and Tableau are doing so well, having great leaders like yourself that are leading great teams and coaching folks up. And I think you were absolutely spot on. Having great product tied to great people is critically important to having long-lasting brands and long-lasting organizations. So can't thank you enough for your time today and all your insights.